right, Webster, the game's over.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're here to talk about Superman 3 and its new 4K Blu-ray that just came out. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of movie reviews, 4K Blu-ray reviews, some tech and game reviews along the way, and now we do podcasts, if you're a fan of all that, then this is the channel for you, and nothing would help this channel out more than by you simply liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Superman 3 was released in June of 1983. It's the sequel to the first two Superman movie, and this one again is directed by Richard Lester, who replaced Richard Donner on the second Superman film. So this is his first solo outing, so we get to see what Richard Lester wanted to do with the Superman property. And this time we kind of get rid of Margot Kidder's Lois Lane, and we bring in Richard Pryor to replace basically her and Gene Hackman and Ned Beatty in this movie. Because all three of them, yes, Margot Kidder does have a small role very early in this movie and at the very end of this movie, but it's really not her movie. From what I understand, either she had a falling out with the producers as well because of Richard Donner, or as the producers say themselves, they just felt like the Lois and Clark Kent Superman storyline had run its course. While I disagree with that, I felt like you could have kept that going, and eventually maybe she could have understood what Superman is, and they could have learned to just appreciate each other, kind of like how Spider-Man did it in the Sam Raimi universe. But that's not what we got here. What we got here is basically a Richard Pryor vehicle. Richard Pryor was actually hired for $5 million. He was on top of the world at this time, and I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I love Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor is one of my favorite stand-up comedians. He's one of my favorite comedic actors, even in his bad movies that most people consider bad, like the movie Moving. I think that the movie Moving is a very underrated comedy as far as 80s comedies go. It's extremely underrated. The jokes in that still kick to this day. And then obviously you get all the movies he did with Gene Wilder, like Stir Crazy and See No Evil, Hear No Evil. So Richard Pryor was firing at all cylinders at this time, so I understand why they wanted to put him in this movie, but your mileage with this movie is going to vary on whether or not you could appreciate Richard Pryor or not. And I gotta be honest, I appreciate Richard Pryor. I thought pretty much everything he did in this movie got a laugh out of me. Is this movie as good as the first two Superman movies? No, it's not. It's not even really close. But in its own way, it's still a good time. It's still fun. I didn't feel like my time was wasted by this movie. I actually had a pretty big smile on my face while I was watching it, just enjoying the comedy. The story of this movie, it's pretty, it's a little bit ridiculous. Basically now, Richard Pryor plays a genius, a computer genius. He's a whiz. He's unemployed at the beginning of this movie, but he starts to work at this firm, and he figures out a way, basically the plot to Office Space, to convert a half a cent into one big check that he sends to himself, and that raises the eyes of the owner of this company, who brings him in and realizes, you know what this guy is? He's the future. He knows computers. So again, this movie, that just shows how dated it is, although they are kind of predicting what computers will do, and if we're not careful with artificial intelligence, we could end up with the plot of Superman 3, so we have to be very, very careful. Also, you can clearly tell in this movie that it inspired such things like Rick and Morty with the split personalities, like how Superman eventually fights the evil Superman that was inside of him, which is just an allegory for, good always triumphs evil. And I also like how they, even in this movie, they're trying to show you that, like, Superman, when he's becoming human, he ends up like the rest of us, like, bitter and angry. And I'm like, man, we knew all this 40 years ago, and we still can't fix these problems. Another thing that gets brought up in this movie is, like, how the little guy always gets screwed over. I'm like, 40 years later, we still are getting screwed over. Everybody, all the working people, still getting screwed over. And they knew this in Superman 3, and no one has fixed that yet. So, this movie was calling a lot of shots and calling out a lot of people that we're still doing today. So I thought that was pretty funny that in this big Three Stooges type of slapstick comedy that's going on, we do have some messages, we do have some themes in there, especially if you're appealing to a 1980s audience, general audience at that, because I would say that this is definitely a kid's movie. I wouldn't say that this is the most thought-provoking Superman movie or the one that's probably the most interesting, but it does have fun elements. It's funny. I enjoyed the comedy aspect of it. It's ridiculously over the top. I mean, our supervillain is the general supervillain. He just wants more. He's greed. Actually, I love the line in this movie where he's like, one thing I can't take is greed. It's like, are you fucking with me? You can't take greed? Have you looked in a mirror? I mean, I get that that's the joke, but I just thought that was hysterical. Everything this guy does is to benefit only himself, and that is it. It doesn't matter who he steps on to get there. And he calls up Richard Pryor after Richard Pryor can't kill Superman. He's like,
I ask you to kill Superman, and you're telling me you couldn't even do that one simple thing.
I mean, just ridiculous stuff. But if you're into this, if you could get past how insane the script is and the lines that these people are delivering, and you're just into the comedy aspect of it, I think you'll get more out of this. Also, the special effects are definitely improved from Superman 2, in my opinion. The flying scenes, yeah, you can still see that it's rear projected, but I think they were kind of starting to understand what they needed to do, and I think this movie overall, from a cinematography standpoint, looks way better than the first two Superman movies, so they definitely got it right there. And then on top of that, Christopher Reeves is amazing as Superman. You can't say anything less than perfect for him. He's basically a 10 out of 10 Superman. He is the benchmark of what Superman is supposed to be, and that's why we all still are hoping for another Christopher Reeves. Yes, we almost got there with Henry Cavill, but WB dropped the ball on that one, and unfortunately we probably won't get to ever see another solo Henry Cavill Superman movie, if we ever get to see him don the cape again. But we still have these amazing Christopher Reeves performances. It doesn't matter what the movie is, he plays Clark Kent and Superman perfectly. Yes, we get no more of Kal-El and looking back at his backstory, but we had two movies to really explore that. Now we're just looking at the future, his future relationships. Is the replacement as his love interest as good as Lois Lane? No, Margot Kidder kind of played that role perfectly, but you still kind of get a little bit wrapped up in that. You could have took that storyline and it really wouldn't have played a big part in the movie anyway. It's kind of like the B storyline compared to what Richard Pryor is doing. So overall, I did still enjoy this movie. I had a few laughs. I think it's definitely a good Superman movie. It's not the worst one that they've ever put out. It's not up there in the upper echelon of Superman movies or superhero movies in general. It's just kind of one that feels like you could watch on a Saturday afternoon and just have a good time with, have a few laughs, and be like, you know what? That movie exists, and I'm kind of happy that it does. So that's about the best I can say about Superman 3. If you're not going to get this 4K Blu-ray, I still think that you'll have a good time watching this movie. But the reason we're all here today is to talk about the Superman 3 4K. And again, it's in this nice Superman collection 4K box set that does have a steelbook collection available, which I am very jealous of everybody who got, because it does look beautiful. That exterior box does look nice, and that's my biggest complaint with this one, is the exterior box is that thin paper plastic that, you know, it's just going to get worn over time. But they did give us individual box design for each movie, and you open it up, and just like the first two, the discs are blue and red, so which is pretty cool. No real individual disc design in there. You don't get anything too special. But everything is uniform in that package, which is nice. You get individual posters on each one of those boxes, which is really cool. They're not the actual theatrically released posters, but the posters that are on here are pretty damn awesome, so I'm very happy with that. And the fact they did the red and blue discs for each movie is pretty cool, even though it's a little bit lazy, but, you know, nothing worth complaining about. The packaging for this is fine. Obviously, those steelbook designs are the better of the two, so if you got those, I guarantee you're probably a little bit happier than me, because that exterior box, again, is just beautiful. So what we said about the first two Superman movies was that the first one wasn't the greatest. You know, it had some issues. It was very grainy. It wasn't a big upgrade from the Blu-ray. And then the second Superman movie, that one was an upgrade. It actually was an upgrade from the Blu-ray. It didn't really have that many super grainy scenes. Everything seemed to be pretty damn good. The HDR was doing its job on the Superman 2 4Ks on both of them, but again, they weren't perfect. You know, there still were some pretty bad scenes in there. There were scenes that were just super grainy, so those weren't perfect. Now with Superman 3, we get again HDR10, no Dolby Vision, and we get a Dolby Atmos track. And if you want to listen to this in the original English, you have a DTS 2.0 on here if you want to check it out in its original form. But to my surprise, this is by far the best 4K in this set so far. Out of this is the fourth disc that I've put in my 4K player, and it is worlds better than the Blu-ray that comes with it. It is worlds better than the other two 4Ks. This is exactly what I was expecting when I bought this set. I expected all the movies to look like this. This is what Warner Brothers 4Ks look like. This looks like Elf, Christmas Vacation, A Christmas Story that all came out last year. Like Training Day. Like, this looks like that high quality, beautiful HDR 4K. You know, the contrast is amazing. It's a lot brighter than the previous Blu-ray. The resolution increase is so high that HDR is really doing its work. You know, the blacks finally hit those deep blacks. You know, the snow in that one scene, like, it just pops off your screen. All the colors, the Superman suit, the red, yellow, and blue, they just really look gorgeous on your screen. This is what I was expecting from these 4Ks. Unfortunately, it took all the way to Superman 3 to get here, because this is pretty much a perfect visual showcase as far as 4Ks go. This is what you expect when they bring older films to 4K. This is what you want. Now, I know people aren't a huge fan of Superman 3, so they're probably like, oh man, they waited until Superman 3. But if you can get around that and you do enjoy Superman 3, you're going to probably be insanely happy with this 4K. It's by far the best in the set. I love how good it looked. I mean, I was like blown away. I was waiting for it to like have a shitty scene in there, but it never happened. Every scene actually looked pretty damn good on my screen. I have no complaints. I tested it out on 2 different TVs and they both looked great. Everything was perfect throughout. I have no complaints visually about this 4K. Now, as far as the audio track goes, again, we get a Dolby Atmos track, and that Dolby Atmos track is really good. I actually got a little surprised by it with how the rear speakers were pumping during the final act. I was like, wow, they really did put a lot of effort into this Dolby Atmos track. So the audio was really good. So between the visuals and the audio, man, we got treated to a really nice 4K disc here at Superman 3. And then the extras, they're all in the Blu-ray again because it's the same Blu-ray that was previously released. There's no difference in that Blu-ray. It's just a pack-in Blu-ray from their previous Blu-ray releases. So everything that was on there is on this disc. You get a making-of documentary, and just like the first 2, those making-of documentaries were something that aired on TV back in the day for 1 hour, so it's like 49 minutes. And, you know, it's not the most detailed thing, but if you're a fan of the movie, I'd say check it out. Again, we get no looking back on, and we probably wouldn't get it for a movie like this because it wasn't the most popular movie at the time. It was actually considered like a disappointment. It didn't even make $100 million, so that should just tell you how superhero films were viewed back in the day. Even the general audience wasn't always heading out for these types of movies. And maybe, you know, that Lois Lane, Clark Kent storyline kind of drove people away from it. I'm not too sure, but yeah, it wasn't the most popular of movies. So maybe that's why we didn't get so many extras on the disc, because other than making of documentary, you get a trailer and that's about it. It's just so far the most bare bones as far as extras go. And, you know, it gets a little frustrating that we don't get any new extras, because in this box set, all we have gotten is just upgrades to the discs, and not even the first one. So it's just the second films that got updates, and now the third film obviously is the best looking so far. I imagine Superman 4 is going to look and sound just as good as this and probably have, again, bare bone extras, but they're promoting the extras like it's a big deal, but it's just previously released extras. Really, you're just updating to the Donner Cut 3 and 4, and that's it. So I wish they were a little more upfront and honest about that. But I'm here today to talk about Superman 3's 4K, and I can't lie and tell you that it's a bad 4K, because it's not. It's a phenomenal 4K. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. I'm only going to take a point off because the film isn't as good, and the extras are really bare bones. But as far as the disc quality goes, this is right up there with some of the best of them from studio releases. And WB, when they really want to do it, they can do some of the best transfers around, and this is no different. So if you are just going to grab Superman 3 on 4K, I could definitely highly recommend it. Just remember, it's Superman 3, so it really depends how much of a fan of the film you really are. And guys, it's Friday. That means it's time for us to do our digital code giveaway. Every Friday, me or Matt will ask you guys 2 digital code giveaway questions. All you have to do is answer one of those questions in the comment section below, and as long as you do that, you come back to Monday's video, we put your name on a magic wheel, we spin that wheel 2 times, and whoever those 2 lucky winners are, they have their choice of the digital codes that you have seen on your screen before you today. So I figured we've been talking about Superman all week. I was going to ask you guys, what is your favorite superhero to ever appear on film? That means not just in the comic books, but he had to appear in film. So what is your favorite superhero who has appeared in film? And I figured, you know what, Superman, one of the biggest franchises of all time. I'm pretty sure I've asked this question before, but what is your favorite franchise of all time? It could be in any genre, horror, action, whatever you feel like. Just what's your favorite franchise of all time? And make sure you leave that comment in the comment section below. I'm looking forward to discussing this with you guys. And I'm hoping that you guys are enjoying my Superman 4K reviews. I'm having a lot of fun rewatching this. And even though Superman was never my hero and these movies were never my movies, I'm really having a good time rewatching them. I'm kind of getting a little bit nostalgic. Obviously, with Superman 3, I'm a huge fan of the 80s, and Superman 3 feels like an 80s movie. So yeah, it's right in my wheelhouse. So I'm definitely having a good time watching this. And guys, I just want to thank you all so much for being a fan of Let's Talk and supporting the channel. We really do appreciate it. If you really want to continue to support this channel, all you have to really do is simply like this video, subscribe to the channel, and then just go out in those streets and tell all your friends about us. And we'll be seeing you around.